what do I have now? I've got a 14 Toyota Camry. It's a 4-cylinder and has a hard starting issue and a check engine light. The check engine light is on for a P0171 system lean. Now it starts difficult or hard. It's got like a long crank, almost as if it's got a bad fuel pump, like it's losing its prime or something. And I took it for a ride up the road and it kind of surges a little bit, and I'm not quite sure what's going on with this. A common problem with these is the mass air meter. So I took the mass air meter out, I cleaned it, I had no change. Well, in our selection of vehicles outside, we have another Camry. So I stole the mass air meter out of that, just out of curiosity, because I wanted to see, I was looking at the scanner and stuff like that, see if it changed anything. And it was a slight improvement on the scanner readings, but it changed nothing in the vehicle. It ran exactly the same. So let me show you here under the hood. Now I already got the engine cover hanging off here. Another failure or another problem is this purge solenoid here. What happens is it gets stuck open and it creates like an internal vacuum leak that can actually create either a rich or a lean mixture depending. So I actually pulled the hose off to see, and I had no vacuum leak to it. And I tried, starting it afterwards. It changed nothing. Everything and all the readings were the same. So that told me, okay, everything's fine there. So let me show you how this thing is starting. Maybe it'll do it right now. It's been off for about 2 minutes. There you see my scanner's hooked up. And on my scanner, if you look close, it shows, I'm not going to climb in the car right at the moment. It shows common repairs for the failure that's there, which is, like I said, a P0171. And the number one is a mass air meter. Like I said, that's not the issue though. So let me go ahead and start this up. So pay attention to see if you can hear it. You hear how it took quite a while to actually start? So I'm thinking that's fuel. That sounds like fuel. Like it's draining back into the tank or something like that, or losing fuel pressure when it should hold some kind of pressure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see the connection is down there underneath that block right there. And I'm going to look through my fuel pressure gauge kit to see if I have stuff so I can splice into that, because this thing does not have a Schrader valve that I can hook into. So I'm going to do that right now because I want to see if I can get a gauge on this thing. So I'd like to see what the actual fuel pressure is. I don't think it's a vacuum leak, or it's definitely not an exhaust leak, because you can actually have an exhaust leak before the number one O2 sensor that could create a lean condition. But I don't think this thing has any vacuum leaks or anything like that. I don't hear anything. It doesn't look like it. Oh, the one other thing that can create is this boot right here from the mass air meter down to the throttle body. If it either came unhooked or if it's cracked or anything like that in the bellow there somewhere, which this is not. I already did check that. Everything appears fine. So I'm going to go ahead and let me grab my fuel pressure gauge and see what I can't figure out. So I got my fuel pressure gauge hooked up now. I don't know the spec. I don't know what it's supposed to be. It really doesn't matter at this point, because once it's running, it runs okay, other than a little bit of a surge or whatever to it. But the main concern is the starting issue and the fact that it's running lean, which, usually if it's running lean, it's either a vacuum leak or something like that, but it could be fuel pressure. So let me show you what I did here. So here's the gauge, and what I did down here might be difficult to see. Right down there, basically I took the hose off that connects to the factory connector down there, right there, and I put a jumper in place. So this jumper allows me to tee in my fuel pressure gauge right there, and then it connects to the line that goes to the fuel rail. So now let's go and start this thing and see what happens. Of course it's going to start rough at first, but I want to see what happens afterwards. Okay, totally expected. And what do we have for fuel pressure? I'm thinking that's low. I would expect to see probably somewhere around 40. Like I said, I don't know what the actual spec is supposed to be at this point in time. But that's pretty low, 23. Most modern cars run at least 35. But I was expecting to see somewhere in the 40 range. Now, when I shut it off, though, that shouldn't drop to anything. Matter of fact, let me take this with me and put this in a spot where I can actually see it when I go to re-crank it. So now let me shut it off. drops right down. Shouldn't do that. It should hold fuel pressure. So let me turn the key on. Got nothing. Key is in the run position. Alright. You see how long it took to start? And it started once it got up to around, I don't know, 20 psi roughly. And now that's only like 22, 23, 24, something in that range. That's definitely not enough fuel pressure. I'm going to look up the spec, but I'd be willing to bet it's supposed to be somewhere close to 40. That junk right there. I don't know if any of you remember that vehicle from way back in the 80s. Actually 90s, I should say. That's a twin overhead cam V6. It's supposed to be something special when it came out. They are garbage. They were garbage back then. So the motor's toasted in that thing. It's only running on 3 cylinders. It's going to get scrapped. We're loading it up with junk, basically. But it's going to get crushed. Alright. So I'm pretty confident this Camry needs a fuel pump. Basically, it's a fuel pump, and then it runs out up to the rail. So I'm going to look up the spec for the fuel pressure, but I'm pretty confident that's no good. And I'm actually confident that that's the starting issue, because as you saw, the pressure stayed at 0 and then came back up once it started. So actually, you know what? Let me shut it off, and I'm going to come back to this in like 3 minutes when I see how long it takes to start. So it's been off for about 5 minutes now. So let's go back and restart this thing. Let's see. Okay. Key is in the run position right now. You can hear the chime. Yeah. That is definitely the issue. I am confident of that. Like I said, I don't know what the actual fuel pressure is supposed to be while running, but I got a funny feeling this thing's bleeding off in the tank. Because you can hear the pump running inside the car. But I'd be willing to bet it's bleeding off inside the tank, like at the fuel pressure regulator that's built in the tank. So I'm going to call and I'm going to find out who has a pump. I actually did a Camry pump about 2 months ago. Similar Camry, but I think it was a 15 fuel pump. It just died on it. So yeah, even Toyotas have problems. It's not just the American cars. A lot of people harp on the American cars, but Japanese cars have them too. They all have their problems. All the manufacturers make decent cars nowadays. It's what happens. Parts do fail. What are you going to do? So, all right, if you're getting anything out of my videos, hit the like button. If you could, please subscribe. That's it for right now. I'll probably make another video when I go to change the pump. So, all right, guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching. Good morning, everyone. How you doing today? So what do I got now? I have that Camry with the fuel pump issue. Remember, I had a fuel pressure gauge on it. It had a hard start, and it was setting lean codes. And I went over about how if you followed what the code reader says, you'd be putting $500 worth of parts in this thing, and it wouldn't fix the problem. This is why you got to diagnose stuff. So here we go. I got the Camry right here. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to throw the fuel pump in it. Now, the fuel pump is actually located under the back seat. So we're going to come over here. And the back seat has to come out. So on these, it's relatively simple. You just grab underneath the edge of the seat here and pull, and it releases the locking tabs. Same thing on this side. Just reach your hand underneath the edge here and pull, and it comes up and out. So now you pull the whole seat assembly out. Just gonna lay it on the roof of the car like that. This car, it depends on the car. This car's got a lot of dings and dents and stuff on it, and I don't know if you can see the paint in it. The car's not pretty, so I'm not overly concerned about this. If the car was really nice, I'd put a moving blanket over top and then lay this down. Since it's not, it's okay. I'm not overly concerned about that. So now the next step is you have to pull this panel out. Now this panel is held in place with like a dum-dum or see this? It's a very sticky substance. It's a seal, and I'm not crazy about how they do it. It works, but I'm not overly crazy about it, because basically once you break the seal, you know, it'll never seal exactly right again, but it is what it is, you know. So I got to get something underneath the edge of this and pry this up. But a lot of times too, it'll distort. So let me see how that works out. And I got my door panel tool basically just stuffed underneath the edge, and you can see it really wasn't even sealed all that well to begin with. So we're going to be pulling this out, and here's a connector here. It's actually, the upper locking piece is actually broken, whatever. So we're going to take this, you squeeze the tab right there, and you got to release it. I may have to do this two-handed, so I'm going to have to put this down. I finally got it to release. It took a little effort, but I got it. So now you have a bunch of 8mm, these holding it down, but I got to disconnect the 3 fuel lines. The top one there, that's a vapor line. One of these is a pressure line, and one of them is a return line, probably, or it could be another vent type line. I'm not quite sure how the system works. So let me do that. Let me get all of these disconnected. Not even 100% certain how they disconnect. This one is, you basically push this red locking piece out, and that will release the line. Basically, you're gonna push it that way. So I might have to get a small screwdriver. And let's do that and see where we wind up. So what that actually is you lift up the edge right there with a tool or something. So this way you could slide that collet back like that, and then this will now come off. Yep, see that? Okay. So now these yellow lines appear to be the same. Let's see. Yep. So just make sure whenever you're doing something, especially in an enclosed area like this, that you are careful not to make these things go flying. Okay, well, they actually lock into place. But this actually has to come completely out, because as you can see on the edge, right there, it blocks the line from coming up and out. So you have to get it completely out. So let me go ahead and do that. So that is it. You just basically pry it completely off and then pop it out. Like I said, just be careful so you don't lose the darn thing in the process. So now these lines, get this down, they should come, yep, straight up and out. So now you tuck them away, out of the way, and then you got to get an 8mm and take those screws out. Do not use an electric drill or electric ratchet or anything like that on this. Do this by hand. Basically, because now you have fuel fumes in here. You use anything electric, you got sparks. Boom. Don't do it. Now we got all the screws out, and like I said, do it by hand. Don't do it with a battery operated, electric, anything like that. Don't do that. You can cause an explosion. So I got all of that out. There's that. Now here comes the tricky part. You gotta pull this thing out. You're going to wind up getting fuel inside the car usually. So this whole thing has to come out. So let me do that. So there we go. The pump is out, and I have it on my little cart. And I don't know if you can see this. Down inside at the bottom, there is a lot of debris in this thing. And even on top here, there's just, there's hairs floating in there. There's just a bunch of debris. So I don't know if the screen is plugged up or what's going on, but I'm going to take this whole thing apart, and also I'm going to check this tube here. I want to make sure there's not a pinhole or something in it, and that's why this thing winds up at 0 fuel pressure after it gets shut off. So I've got to make sure that that's all okay. Let me show you the new pump. So there's the new pump. It's right from Toyota. You can't get an aftermarket for this. I did inquire into it, but I did have to do a fuel pump in one of these things a couple months back. So you got to disassemble this whole thing and take it apart. So I'm going to work on doing that right now. And if anything special comes up, I'll show you a video of that. Whenever I'm working on something like this too, to avoid damaging it, because this thing protrudes so much, the float piece itself, I will usually take the float arm off. This way I can avoid, possibly bending it or damaging it, or even, because I could break the sender, because obviously the new pump doesn't come with a sender on this unit. So on this one, it's actually pretty simple. Most of them just snap in. This one has this little tab that gets pushed down. Once that gets pushed down, then all you got to do, push it down, and then that rolls over like that. So then that comes out of its holder, and voila, comes right out. This way you avoid, bending it, denting it, anything like that. Breaking the sending unit. That's the last thing I want to do. Now, to get the pump out, the pump is in that housing inside there. To get that out, you got to lift those tabs right there. So let me do that. So it's just a matter of picking up on these tabs slightly, and then this whole assembly lifts up. Now also, the pump has that tube there. That tube is part of the pickup. And same thing, the way it connects here, I got to lift up on a tab right here to get that up and out. So let me do that and let me get that out. And then the whole thing will slide up and out. All right, so there we go. I have it up and out, and I think I actually found the problem. Check this out. See that? That's the fuel pressure regulator. And that's an O-ring that's pushed out. So, now, I noticed a few things as I was taking this thing apart. And I'm almost wondering if this pump has been replaced once before. The customer didn't say nothing. But that will cause fuel pressure to bleed off. Especially since that's the pressure line right there. But like I said, I noticed that there are certain things that made me think to myself that this pump has been replaced. But the fact that the customer didn't tell me anything makes me wonder. So, and look at that. You see how those locking tabs are not in place? I didn't do this. Somebody else had done this. That is not seated. So you can actually see, if you look, you see how bent and distorted that is? That is not supposed to be like that. This whole thing has to come apart anyway, so let me pop these off. These are just, like I said, same thing, just little plastic retainers. Let me get this thing off of there and take a better look. Okay, so I got all of those disconnected. Now let me pop this down. So now the pump will come out this way. I don't recall. I think I have to undo the harness up here, like so it'll feed through. Yep. Okay. I got a funny feeling somebody's already put a pump in this thing. But at this point, it's getting another pump. So let me mess with this. I'm going to have to pop this regulator out and get this all back together. So let me get this apart first, and then I'll explain what's going on. Okay, so that is the whole problem right there. But we are still, because we're here, we are putting a pump in this thing regardless, because I don't want to wind up with a problem. But I'm confident that this in itself was the problem. Now you can actually see how distorted that seal is right there. So now I'm going to have to get some O-rings that'll work with this. I don't know where in the hell I'm going to get them, but I'm going to have to find something somewhere that's going to work. When this goes back together too, let me pop this pump off here. It's basically just a push tab right there. I already disengaged it. So now this pops straight out. Now when this goes back together, this collar here that you saw fall out, that goes there, and then this O-ring goes on top there. And what happens is that collar holds the O-ring in that spot, and that inserts into that area right there. Now, the funny thing is, somebody had that backwards. Somebody had it like this. Somebody had the seal down here with the collar on. That's not how it goes. It goes the other way around. So we got a couple of whammies here. Basically, whoever did this repair, and I don't know who it was, I'm gonna call the customer again and find out what's going on here, because now this is a mystery that I'm not able to figure out. I mean, I know what's going on. You know, I figured that much out, but you know, who did what and why? I don't know. Let me see what I can figure out here. But like I said, it's getting a new fuel pump regardless, only because, you know, I have it, and I don't know the condition of that pump. Was it sucking air? Did it run dry? Did it ruin the pump assembly inside there, the actual gears? You know, who knows? Who knows? Plus, there's so much debris in this thing. I'm actually going to clean this whole entire housing out. Let's actually look inside here. I don't know if I just gave you a close-up view of my nostril, but let's see. You look inside here. Look at all that debris inside there. You see that, right? All the black specks and stuff. So I'm going to brake clean this thing out, get it nice and clean. And then, like I said, I got to figure out something with this. I'm not sure if I have any O-rings. I think I might. I think I have some O-rings left over from a job that I did on a Cadillac, maybe, and it might have similar size O-rings that I can use. As long as they go in and they're, you know, they fit nice and snug, then I'm confident they're not going to be a problem. So, all right, let me go that route and see what happens. Now, I do not have an O-ring that'll fit this vehicle, or fit this that's even close to this, but giving this O-ring a good look, I don't see any nicks, scratches, or anything like that. It did fold over, but I don't see any actual damage to it other than it's slightly distorted. I think once it's seated, it'll be absolutely fine in there, because it does go up inside right there, and that surface area looks fine too. Now, I've discussed the attributes of using that stuff, transmission assembly lube. The stuff is excellent, and it's excellent for seals like this, and it dissolves. It's a low temperature melting point too. So on this, I got to see, because it might be better if I stick this up inside there and then push the regulator in. I'm going to try it both ways, see whichever works best. But that stuff, an absolute must to have as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, basically you lube everything up really well. You want to slobber it on there like you're icing a cake, and then you put it together, and then obviously once you're done, any excess you just wipe off. But this stuff dissolves in fuel, and it melts at a very low temperature. Don't get red, because red, if you're ever using this on a transmission, you'll think you have a transmission fluid leak once it melts. So, yeah, let me get this in place. That did insert quite easy. I did stick the O-ring up inside there. As you can see, I glommed on a whole bunch of that transmission assembly gel. I glommed it onto the actual regulator itself. After the O-ring was seated inside there, I glommed a whole bunch of that stuff in there, and then basically just, boop, it popped right in. So now, what I can do is I can put the fuel pump together. Basically, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the collar on and then the seal on, and then insert that up into place on here, and then I'm going to get everything clipped into place, making sure that this locks into where it's supposed to be. Now, that didn't just push out like on its own. That was assembled wrong. There's no way that fuel pressure or anything could have made that pop past these locking clips, because these pieces lock over these pieces. So it was assembled wrong, whoever did it. All right, let's get going with that. And like I said, collar first, then O-ring. Just like that. And then I'm going to slobber that up and put that together. If you look really close at the new pump compared to the old pump, you'll see how bent that actually is. See how the end of that is bent downward, and this is kind of like straight across, like it's level. See, like those castle tops? This one is bent downward. That one is not. This one's actually hitting the filter, or the screen. This one is not. So Like I said, that's why it's getting a new pump regardless. There we go. So that's all slobbered up, and then that's going to go back up into place. Like I said, up inside there, and that should work out fine. So let me get that done right now. And actually, I think I might insert the wiring harness through. No, I can't. I got to do it last. All right, let me do that. I mean, I can. It's just easier just to do it last. Taking it off might be a little difficult to push in the clip, but no big deal. So let me get this up and into place. Now that snapped together relatively easy. You felt the seal, stop for a moment, and then as soon as I put pressure on that to palm it in place, it snapped. It just clipped all together, and you can see how nice and firmly clipped that is. So that's installed the right way now. Now basically I just have to install the wiring harness, like so, and then I'm going to insert this whole thing in that housing. So that's it. That just drops right in place. So now what I want to do is I want to catch the wiring in this clip here, and this one actually clips in over here somewhere. Not 100% certain. I'll figure that out in a second. But let me get that all together, and then I have to route this part over and down because that's part of the pickup. So let me do that. So now that has a receiver groove, this pipe here, right there, that will insert into that piece there. So you got to bend this to get that down into place. And then the wiring harness clips in on the very top here. So that's how that's supposed to look. Now let's catch this. So now with that all the way in the way it's supposed to be, this clips in down here. There's no O-rings in here. It's just a, I guess it's like a bleed off or something. And they just use this so you don't hear like a splashing inside the vehicle since the pump is underneath the back seat. So it just clips on like that. No need to worry, like I said, about O-rings, because as you see, it's got a giant opening right there. So now this is actually ready to take, or to get the float reinstalled on there. And then one other thing too is there's a tube inside the tank you have to disconnect. Does it go? No, I'm sorry, it goes right here. And you have to disconnect it to get it out because it basically, like, it's what they call a saddle tank. What a saddle tank means is it's got a sump on the passenger side, and it's got humps over for, like the exhaust system or a drive shaft if it was an all-wheel drive. Then it's got a sump on the other side, like the driver's side. So basically you have to draw fuel from both sides, because if it just drew fuel from one side, you're going to run empty and still have fuel on the other side. So they actually have a tube that runs over to the other side to draw fuel from that side. So basically it draws evenly. So when you're empty, you're actually empty on both sides. Some cars actually have, if it's a deep enough sump, they actually have a separate pump on that side to transfer fuel to the other side. So this does not have that. This just has a suction tube. So basically once I get this thing down into place, that suction tube, I have to pull it up and then actually connect it once it's inside. So let me go ahead and let me put this back on right now while I'm thinking about it. So it's just very simple. You just insert it. In like that. And then this. Oops. I got that caught up on there. And then just like that. I can't do this one-handed because I got to hold that down slightly. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I got it. And that's it. And you want to be gentle with this. You don't want to bend this rod or anything like that because it's going to affect the what the gauge reads. So, and, oh, I didn't show you. If you look inside, I did clean this thing out pretty well with brake clean. So, all right. Let me go ahead and let me get this thing ready to install. Alright, so just so you can see, there's that tube I was telling you about that you got to pick up and out of the tank. So I'm going to get ready to drop this in place. And like I said, you have to pull this up like this and then get the pump about halfway in place. Unfortunately, there's no way for me to film this and do it at the same time. So let me just get that part of it done and we'll go from there. And unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to bother hooking up the fuel pressure gauge because it's actually a little bit involved to hook up the fuel pressure gauge for me to show you exactly what's going on. but let me just get this done and see what happens. So just like that is how you have to have it. You have to pull this up and through on this side here. This way it's not catching anything. Those two lines are not hooked to anything. So let's just get this down in place. Like I said, I can't film this at the same time. So there's that line in place. So now this whole thing can go back down inside, and then we can bolt it back up. Again, do not use electric tools. You can use air tools or do it by hand. I prefer by hand because also you can feel when you're trying to break it free how the bolts feel coming out. This way, in case one's going to break, you might be able to wrap it with a hammer or something like that to prevent that. Now let's get this all together. So there it is in place, and now we're going together with the install, basically reverse procedure to install. Once I get this bolted down completely, then I'm going to just blow the area out in there and there with compressed air. What else? Oh, if you look, you can actually see that. See the little tab right there? Right there, that tab, that's part of that metal locking ring. It fits into a receiver groove, which you can see it right next to it. See it right there? That's how you know you're in the right spot. So now I just got to get that to line up. And once I do that, then I can hook everything else up. So there it is, everything's locked into place. So now basically I just gotta put the cover back on, connect the connector, like so. You heard it snap. And I do not have any dum-dum like I thought I did. So just put this stuff, this gooey stuff back together. Lay it in place and push it down firmly to make sure that that's all seated. So that should be good like that. What else? All right, I think that's it for this part. Let me take my tools out of here. Let me start up and see how it runs. So I decided after all to hook the fuel pressure gauge up to it because I'm curious, and I'm sure you guys are curious. It's just a little bit of a pain on this thing to do it because you got to take the air box and everything else out to disconnect it and then hook the jumper in between. So let me go ahead. It will have a rough start in the very beginning because now it's got air in the system in the back and it's got air in the system in the front. So let's start it up and see how she does. And then we can actually see the fuel pressure. All right. Start it right up. Now, let's see what the actual pressure is. Look at that. So that's perfect. That's 49, because the spec was, I think, 44 to 55. I did look that up. So that's perfect. Now, I'm curious, when I shut it off, it should hold fuel pressure, but let's find out. I could be wrong. It's a deadhead system, meaning it doesn't have a return. And there we go. It's holding pressure. So if you recall in the previous video, it wouldn't start until it got up to about 15 psi, because that thing would drop right to zero. Now over time, this thing may drop down a little bit. Who knows? By the morning, it could be down to 20. It could even be down to close to zero. But it always has. It should always have that fuel in the line immediately. So as soon as you turn the key, that thing should bump right up. So this thing should fire right off now on a restart. Yep, it would never do that before. Well, there again, we're at 49, so I'm very happy with that. Let me shut it down. And now this way I can disconnect all the tools and stuff from this, take the gauge off. So, all right, I'm happy with that. I'm confident this is fixed. So, I mean, as you can see, it was whoever installed that pump didn't do it right. They didn't pay attention. All it takes is just a few extra minutes to pay attention and do the right thing to get a job done correctly. So, anyway. Let me get this all back together, and then I'm going to road test it. I'm going to clear the check engine light, And like I said, it drove actually okay. I mean, it was a little sluggish, and it did have a little bit of a hesitation to it, but not, not to the point where you would think it was what it was. But, all right, if you're getting anything out of my videos, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. I guess that's it for right now. You guys have a great day. Keep wrenching.